And then we drop that reel. It's been shared so many times. Somewhere between 40 and 50 million people have seen that story. And it's been liked somewhere between 1 and 2 million times. It's been shared hundreds of thousands of times, right? So those numbers mean nothing except for the correlation they have to impact on people. How have you navigated the positive impact it's had, but also the negativity that's come with it?
I just need to let this go. I need to surrender this. I need to just not worry about it. And then I looked on Instagram and sure enough, it had been released. And then within minutes, all of a sudden it's like, oh, 20 likes, oh, 100 likes, oh, 1,000 likes, oh, it's getting shared everywhere. You know, I've just been astounded by the response. It's been a wild ride, navigating through my own emotions and my own, feelings of pride. But then you also have to wrestle with the ego associated with it. It's been amazing to see people's hearts, the prayers, the love, the encouragement, the support. But with that, there's always the other side. There's been a lot of very negative comments from people, even claiming that my wife's death was my own fault. What I had to do was really take a step back and recognize that that wasn't a reflection of me or my own heart. It was a reflection of what they're navigating through. I've really just taking time to actually pray for those individuals. It's helped me to cut the strings, it's helped me to give back the energy that they're trying to project onto me. It's been incredible, man. The ripples from you opening your heart, opening your space to be able to do this has led me to book consultant that I'm working on a few different books for right now. Going to start a new business to hopefully move in a coaching and consulting space, something that's more in alignment with my heart.
James Dykes.
Oh man, ready for it.
Welcome back to the Roller Coaster Podcast.
Thank you. It's so good to be here, bro. It's so good to be here. Yeah. I'm blessed. I'm blessed to be here with you. And it's going to be more a blessing when I kick your butt on the golf course later.
Yeah, I've been grinding, so we're going to see. I do fear your game a bit. But I think with 100 and whatever it is outside, I have home court advantage.
You do.
I've played in this kind of heat. Doesn't faze me. I think your hands are going to get a little wet, a little slippery. It's going to be tough.
Okay. All right.
That's what I'm banking on.
Okay. We'll reveal the scorecard for everyone to know later.
You need no introduction because you are a return guest. We've only ever had one other return guest. It hasn't aired. It was Jake and Shay Borup. Jake was the one that had a widowmaker heart attack and lived and then got a heart transplant. And so we wanted to close the loop on the story with the post-heart transplant. And so, we don't normally do this, but when somebody comes on and their story has the kind of impact that your story had, and we've become as close as we've become, it's easy to want to do it again.
Yeah, no, I've been blown away by the response to just sharing something authentically hard. And I feel like it's something that the world is desperate for. And the platform that you've created for people to tell their story, to have the opportunity to go through the healing experience of expression, and also to make other people not feel alone in what they're going through. And so I feel like the response to me showed that the world is hungry for that authenticity, that expression of sadness and hope, grief and glory, because they both can be held with space.
That's well said. So, I want to frame up this second conversation with what happened last time.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to give sort of my perspective on how we connected, what I was observing. And then I'd like for you to kind of close the loop from your standpoint of like going into it. How were you feeling? How did you think it went? And then ultimately we'll talk about like the response from the world from that episode. So, when you reached out, we had gotten to a place where the podcast had already started to become pretty big. Right. And so as a result of that, we had a lot of people, and still to this day, like it's crazy. The number of people that reach out to come on the show is like in the hundreds a month, right? So
Right.
it's a lot of people. And I have a producer that basically screens all of those messages because I just simply don't have the bandwidth to go
Yeah.
through them all and like figure out which are the right ones. And then, if there's stories in there that he thinks are meaningful, like we'll respond, and typically I'll talk to him first. And so in your case, you reached out, we didn't respond. I think you reached out again, we didn't respond. And I want to say it was like the third or fourth time. You're like, hey, like I really have a message that I want to share, and I think this would be a great fit, and I'd love to meet you and the whole thing.
Right.
So my producer sent it over to me, said, hey, this guy's like persistent. Do you want to have a conversation with him? And so we got your number. We talked on the phone. I remember where I was at. I was actually laying on the turf in my backyard when we were talking.
Mm-hmm.
And, we had this conversation, and you told me your story. You told me you're a man of faith. I think we talked about Jesus Christ and faith more than we talked about anything else on that call.
Yep.
I was
Yeah.
drawn to that. And so I said, pick a date. Let's, sometime in this month, just come out and we'll do it. And so, that date rolls around, and I can't remember why, but finally orchestrated, right?
Mm-hmm.
We end up doing this in my backyard.
Yep.
At my house, near my pool. And I remember you arriving and getting out of the car, and I felt this nervous energy that I had like never felt before from
Mm-hmm.
another guest. And I remember even telling you it multiple times, like, hey, it's all good, dude. Like,
Yep.
I know you've been following the podcast, and maybe that part of it's me and part of it's like we're at my house, and, you've never like been on a platform before to share this. So I understood why, but I said, hey, it's all good. Like, calm down. You got this. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But that nervous energy kind of persisted. And we start the podcast. And I remember, I think it was the only time in the history of the podcast that I had to stop the podcast and tell you again, like, hey, bro, you got this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's all good.
Yep.
And, you shared your story, and we got done. And I just remember you feeling almost like bad in a
Mm-hmm.
way. You're like,
Yeah.
dude, I totally bombed that.
Yep.
I'm so sorry to waste your time. And I was like, bro, like, no, it's all good. Like, was
know.
it helpful for you? Like, and we weren't even sure we were going to like put it out,
Mm-hmm.
because it was just like, for those who have listened to the long form, which there's a lot of you, it was just kind of, you were nervous. Like, it
I
was
was
a little
nervous.
bit choppy.
Yep.
It wasn't easy to piece together. And then, a month or so goes by, 2 months, we released the episode. I remember, by the way, the number of times you had reached out, like, when's it going out? When's it going out?
I was so
When's
anxious.
it going out?
I was so anxious because I was, I felt that nervous energy. Obviously, I felt that, that fear of that I had missed the mark.
Yeah, your opportunity kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly. Like, oh, you just let it float by. And then I remembered your reassurance of what you're like. My producers take lots of notes. They have a full page full. There's lots of moments in there that we're going to be able to cultivate out. And I just remember being like, so then it got my excitement going too, because I was like, oh,
when's it coming?
okay, there was something in there. So
Yeah. And then we drop that reel, and everything changes.
yeah.
Like, you pick it up from here.
Yeah. So I can echo what you felt from me, because I had been at so long story short, I had actually gone through a major health event right before that it really shook me up. I had some internal bleeding that occurred, and I ended up in the hospital about 2 weeks before I came down here. And it really just shook me up all over the place. Like, what am I doing? What's the point of this all? Why do I feel this need to share my story? Is this all about me, or is this truly trying to help other people? I just felt this weightiness as I came in here, because I knew that there was something the Lord was trying to do, that he was trying to allow me to be bold and courageous to be able to express. And So yeah, when I walked into your backyard, I was shaking in my boots. And, in some ways it was because of new environment, new things, you got to get comfortable with it. But that whole interview, I just remember sitting there being like, with those whispers in my ear almost of like, dude, what are you doing here? You're an imposter. You don't belong here. Your story is nothing. Yes, you've gone through something hard, but, you know, what
Who
who
cares?
cares?
Yeah.
Yeah, other people have gone through worse. James, just shut up and keep your mouth shut. And so when I got done with it, that's exactly what I expressed to you. Like, oh my gosh, I wasted your time. You opened up your home to me, and I'm sitting here just blubbering away. Um, but yeah, so then when the reel released, and it was like, oh, what was interesting is that I was actually talking to a friend at that very moment that you released it, and I was telling her, you know what, I just need to let this go. I need to surrender this. I need to just not worry about it. And then I looked on Instagram as I was still talking to this friend, and sure enough, it had been released. And I'm like, that's crazy. The timing of me saying, I don't even care. I don't even care what happens. And then bloop, it's released. And then within minutes, all of a sudden it's like, oh, 20 likes. Oh, 100 likes. Oh, 1,000 likes. Oh, it's getting shared everywhere. And then, I've just been astounded by the response and the level of support that, random strangers have given to me, all the prayers that have surrounded me and my girls because of their hearts and their willingness to open themselves up to feeling and empathizing with somebody else. And yeah, man, it's been a wild ride, to say the least. Navigating through my own emotions and my own, feelings of pride, because I'm proud of what it was produced, and I'm proud of what, you and your team were able to put out there. But then you also have to wrestle with the ego associated with it. And it's like, no, this isn't about me. This is the Lord's story. And that's the only reason that there's been the authentic response, is because this is something that he's trying to use for people to start to normalize the fact that we all suffer. Literally, it's the most common human experience that we have, is that we all suffer, yet we all struggle, especially as men, to articulate the things that we struggle with. And how perfect that we're doing this in June for Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, because, that's been my heart for a long time. I've always been a bit of an odd duck because I've been so expressive of things, and it's made me question, what's wrong with me, kind of going back to those same feelings. But, I've really just come back to, if this can help one other soul to not feel alone, if this can help one other person to keep just moving in that direction of life still has something for me, that's why I'm here. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for.
That's well said. Yeah, I mean, so to quantify the impact that had, that story about your wife who passed, and we actually don't know the exact metrics because it's been shared so many times,
Mm-hmm.
but it's somewhere between 40 and 50 million people have seen that story. And it's been liked, I don't know, somewhere between 1 and 2 million times. It's been shared hundreds of thousands of times, right? So, you think about that from those numbers mean nothing except for the correlation they have to impact on people.
Exactly.
Now, but not all impact is positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've had to sort of navigate with, like, again, hundreds, I don't know, 100,000 comments or something across these videos. Some are super positive, life-changing. Some are the opposite, right? So
Right.
how have you, maybe from the first time we released it to the last time we released it, how have you navigated the positive impact it's had, but also the negativity that's come with it?
Yeah, no, I think that it's been amazing to see people's hearts. It's been amazing to listen, or not listen, but read the words that other people are sharing with us, the prayers, the love, the encouragement, the support. But with that, there's always the other side. And there's been a lot of very negative comments from people, even claiming that my wife's death was my own fault, or rebuilding your marriage. What were you rebuilding from? See, guys they just torment women, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it was just very negative. And what I had to do was really take a step back and recognize that that wasn't a reflection of me or my own heart. It was a reflection of what they're navigating through in their own lives, a reflection of whatever they've experienced in their childhood and thereafter, to create this dynamic to where they can't open up their hearts to see a story that is just heartbreaking, but then also being able to gravitate towards some hope from that. And so, I've at first it was really difficult for me when the reel was first released. I mean, I took things personal. I took things, I wore it took it on the chin a little bit. And this last time you've released it, I've really, both positive and negative, predominantly positive, but, just taking time to actually pray for those individuals, because they've gone through something that has created that expression in themselves. And so it's helped me to cut the strings, it's helped me to give back the energy that they're trying to project onto me. And, hope that they can find some comfort and safety and security within themselves, so that within the sphere of their influence, that they can have a more loving impact on the world around them.
Yeah. Have you had any particular interactions that have stood out to you?
I would say that one specifically, speaking with Sarah Nasca after the podcast was released, she was just incredibly sweet and kind, and she actually had a call with me, and she's laid out some breadcrumbs for me associated with what I'm following for some of the writings that I'm doing and some of the books that I'm hoping to publish, because she helped me to connect with other people, and it just created this very unique web of networking and people that I've been able to engage with, and it's been really meaningful. And then so many widows and widowers. Because of the podcast, it led to ripples where some random beautiful soul mentioned to me this widowers community called Refuge Widowers, and it's based in Atlanta. Daniel Brooker is the founder of it, and it's the only one in the United States. There's a lot of different groups for widows, but widowers, not so much.
Really?
And so it led me to be able to connect with him and find out that they run this nonprofit where they have a retreat twice a year for widowers. It's fully paid for, room and board. All you have to do is buy your plane ticket to get there. And to be able to be around other men that have also lost their wives, some much longer, some much shorter, but to be able to connect with other men that have had a similar experience and both be able to learn from them and also encourage and support them through their journey has been incredibly meaningful to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you do one of these retreats?
I did in March. Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
So, man, the start of this year was just wild. So my daughters and I went to Hawaii for my birthday. Just decided, this year we're going to go celebrate there. We got back, and 4 days later, I left for Atlanta to go to over there. And it was incredible. There was about 16 other men that have lost their wives there, plus the guides. So they're guides that more or less have gone through the journey already, or gone to a retreat and now are, rebuilding their lives. Some of them are remarried. Some of them, haven't gone that route yet. But just an opportunity to be together. It was such a sacred place. It was some sit down and have conversations, kind of panel style, asking questions of the ones that have gone before. And also just time to just hang out, and throw the football around and, do some journaling and reading, do some working out together, jumping in the cold plunging in the lake together.
That's cool.
And the moment that I'll always remember is that they call it a forging event. It's the very last night you're there, and they take these iron rods and they get them, burning hot campfire. I mean, raging fire, and they stick them in there. And the whole idea is that you take this rod and you just beat on it and you twist it up and you make it into something, that looks like it's been just completely marred. But through that forging and through that experience that the iron goes through, it's actually harder and stronger because of that beating and that suffering that it goes through. And so I should have brought it with me, but I have mine, and mine's in the, just I flattened out one of the pieces almost to completely flat, which they were like, wow, we've never really seen somebody get that aggressive. And I was like, well, I got a little angst inside of me. And so I shaped mine in the shape of it's kind of like a U, but to me it represents, that God's with us in the highs, and the inverse is in the lows, the mountaintops and the valleys. And so, yeah, I have it sitting on my desk still. Look at it basically every day when I'm working. And, it's just a good reminder of the community that's with me, and that I'm not alone in this journey. And also that the Lord is so faithful, in both the mountaintops that we want to shout from, and, the things that we want to reveal to the world, but also in the valleys when we can't see past our nose of, what is next? What's going on? Why am I here?
Yeah.
It's been incredible, man. The ripples from you opening your heart, opening your space to be able to do this has led me to, a book consultant that I'm working on a few different books for right now. It's really inspired me for some of the business ventures that I want to step into. Going to start a new business to hopefully move in a coaching and consulting space, and kind of have a 3-year plan of moving away from maybe the 9 to 5 and moving into something that's more in alignment with my heart.
Amazing. So anytime somebody asks me what the Roller Coaster podcast is all about, for the first 40 or 50 episodes, I found it somewhat difficult to describe why I do these types of interviews.
Mm-hmm.
But it's become really clear to me now. And it's through seeing the response from interviews like yours.
Mm-hmm.
And what I share with people now is that everybody in the world is suffering to varying degrees.
Yep.
Like everybody.
Everybody.
I could ask Tyler behind us. I could walk outside and ask the guy on the street. I could ask my wife. I could ask my friends. Everybody's got something they're dealing with,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're all going through our own version of this roller coaster of life. And if I lost my job yesterday and I think my world is over and I'm contemplating suicide today,
Mm-hmm.
because that's my reality, it's really hard for me.
Yep.
And then I hear James Dykes get on the mic and say, my whole world was taken from me, but I've been able to persist. And here's how. That gives me hope.
Yep.
Right? That helps
Amen.
me see I'm not in this alone, right? So what is the power of I'm not in this alone done for you? And what have you seen it do for other people that have engaged with you?
I think it's, it gives you safety and security within yourself, just to know that there's commonality. We're communal beings. That's the way we were created. And when you feel like you're, that you're not equally yoked with somebody else, that you can, have such an isolation, because isolation is one of the quickest ways for somebody to just lose their mind. And, to a certain degree, I kind of felt that at different times before connecting with so many different people, because one of the things that's interesting is that, we all suffer. But then there's always this dynamic where people are communicating with you, where they're trying to, share what they've gone through, but then they almost want to but it's not as hard as yours. And it's just this weird dynamic that we have as human beings. I mean, yes,
Measuring trauma and
measuring.
grief. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
exactly.
weird.
It's so weird to me because it's like, well, yeah, you lost XYZ and that really sucks. That they could have been, a huge person in your life. And I think what's the most unique about, you know, the community and having other people is that it gives you the ability to express openly, authentically, without having to have any mask on. And so meeting other people that have also lost their wives, and having the impact that this episode had by helping to create that opportunity for me, um, is it's life changing. It really is. It's something that I will never uh, forget. That will be something that'll, it's ingrained deep in my soul that I have brothers that are praying for me right now. They know that I was coming down here for this. They know the deepest parts of my heart. They know the realities of what I'm living in, raising my two daughters without my wife here. And there's just something about that. And it's, I think the deeper aspect too is that it's also brought me back to a deeper relationship with the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ, because Jesus did what he did on the cross so that he could tear the veil. There's so much symbolism in the gospels of what was occurring and why it occurred, but he gave us a promise that he will never leave us and never abandon us. And even in the midst of those valleys, I never lost sight of my faith, but I lost sight of who I was equally yoked with and who was walking through the fire with me at different points of the journey, because the grief is so overwhelming. And there's even stories in the Bible actually that talk about people that were walking on the road with the resurrected Jesus. But they were so engulfed in the fact that he had been crucified and everything that happened, they couldn't even see that he was walking physically with them. And I related with that. I was like, oh man, that's what grief can do. That's what suffering at that kind of level can do. And I want to be able to hold space for both, honoring my wife and who she was and the life she lived and all the beautiful gifts that she gave me, and the suffering and the sadness that's associated with that, but also holding space for the fact that she's now seated in heaven, dancing with Jesus, so proud of me and my daughters, and I'm still have breath in my lungs. So that means that there's still something that the Lord has for me that he wants me to be open to. And if I'm so stuck over here, I'll close myself off to what he really wants.
There you go.
But I don't want to avoid it either, to be like, oh, I'm okay. No, it's both. We're very unique individuals that we can actually hold space for multiple emotions at one time. And I think that's the one thing that most men haven't really been given a very good model of what it is. Or, I say we got to check our programming a lot in the posts that I make, because we get programmed a certain way, to think a certain way, to associate with things a certain way, when really those are frameworks and boundaries that people have given that really are somebody else's experience. We can take our lament and our suffering and we can elevate it to the place of God and what he has, because he said we're seated in the heavenly places. Or we can bring God down to our level and then recognize, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about these, you said the word gifts and it sparked a thought that I had. So when my wife and I went through something really hard as a family, where she was pronounced dead and then ended up living through that experience. And that kicked off a really hard couple of years in our marriage.
Right.
Because I had some core fundamental, spiritual beliefs that changed through that experience. And when I shared those, it became really hard on our marriage, really contentious. And so we started seeing a therapist. And I remember one of the sessions that we had, um, my wife brought up a word which was around worthiness,
Mm-hmm.
being worthy, right?
Yeah.
And our therapist said he gave us a homework assignment. The assignment was that perfect parents ruin children,
Mm-hmm.
and there's actually gifts to imperfection. And there's a book that was written by Brene Brown, who's all time,
Yeah. I love Brene.
and she wrote this book called The Gifts of Imperfection, and he had us read it. And the whole concept is that when we go through things in life, it's the refiner's fire. It makes
Mm-hmm.
us stronger. It makes us better. It gives us the ability to really understand and empathize with our children
Yep.
and other people that we love when they're going through it, right? And so I had this like sort of spiritual um, awakening or vision, which was around the Savior.
Mm-hmm.
And when he performed the atonement, he first of all had all the glory in the world,
Mm-hmm.
all of God's glory, but then he reached a low that, suffered for the sins of all mankind. So he reached a low that none of us will ever have to reach.
Yep.
And what did that do? It gave him a spectrum of understanding for each of us that is infinite. And so no
Mm-hmm.
matter how low we go, he's been lower.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me realize that, man, praise the Lord for giving me the trials that I've had,
Mm-hmm.
because it's taking my floor lower and lower and lower.
Right.
And praise the Lord for some of the successes that I've had, because my ceiling has gotten higher and higher and higher, right? So now my spectrum of sort of
Yes.
understanding is vast.
Mm.
And therefore, I can relate to most men and
Yep.
most people that are going through it, right?
Yep.
It's like, hey, I've been there.
Yeah.
I've been in your shoes and I understand. And, so what sort of gifts do you feel like you've been blessed with since you've had to endure such a crazy trial? Not just the death of your wife, but also many other trials that, health complications and near death experiences for yourself and,
Yeah.
other trials.
Yeah, man. I that was so well said. I haven't heard it described in that way, but I really appreciate that. That we go through trials and we go through trouble so that we can relate one to another, and I love that. Um, I think that it does. It opens up your heart to people when you go through something so devastating. And like you said, the trials didn't start with my wife passing away. I actually was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. They actually had to resuscitate me as a baby. And then my parents got divorced when I was 2, and had to open up my heart to a new stepmom coming into the picture. And then as a young child, I was sexually molested by a babysitter. And, then I lost my brother at 16 to a drug overdose. And then, and it's just been this lifelong of all these different atrocities that have occurred. And then you begin to just empathize and understand what somebody else is going through, so that you can show up for them, so that you can make space for them to be able to open up. Because there's nothing that hinders our hearts more than masking, pushing down, and, trying to keep ourselves from being able to articulate and express. And I think that's actually one of the first things that we ever talked about on the phone call that you were mentioning, laying in your backyard. I remember I was pacing in my yard, because that's when I do my best. I'm a bit ADHD, so I got to be, moving or doing something. Yeah. But I remember talking to you about what my grief and suffering opened up for me to see, is that this was never God's design for these things to happen. God's design was the garden. And I've always come back to the garden ever since losing my wife, and a little bit before that, is that, we knew only love. We knew only openness. We knew only light, or at least that's what Adam and Eve knew. And they literally walked naked. But we think of that physically because that's the way our brains have been taught to think, like, oh, they were naked. But it's like emotionally naked, spiritually naked.
Children. Yeah.
They were like children. Exactly. And that's the beauty of marriage, is because as you work through those things that you and your wife have worked through, you're able to be open and fully naked before your wife, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And that was God's design. That was what he wanted for us, until our minds were opened to the evil in this world after they ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And I feel like that sometimes religious communities can really focus on, they disobeyed and they were punished for it. And thank God for Jesus, because he came and died on the cross. It's like, yeah, that's kind of half the story. But if you look a little deeper, you'll actually see something a little bit further in that. And for me, what I saw was, what was their first expression after they ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? What actually happened? And it was, oh my gosh, I'm naked. What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? That was something I could relate with, because I had those same expressions and same fears of myself that would manifest all over the place. Happened as I was trying to come in and do the last podcast with you. What is wrong with me? I screwed that up. I am a piece of what, and blah, 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 blah. And I need to hide. I need to hide from this. I need to put on a mask. I need to put on a persona.
My microphone like
exactly. I'm going to hold my baby and I'm going to hide right here. And that's the thing that I see. That's the struggle that we have, is that now this perfect love, this love that we were knit together from, had split off into two different expressions. One that was unconditional, which we can express, we open up, we feel, we have joy, we have peace. And then another one, which is conditioned by fear, where we can be impatient, unkind, lacking gentleness in our expression. But God's design was for us to be fully whole. And so part of his redemption story is allowing these things to happen in our lives, allowing the suffering to occur, because then it allows us to be the body by understanding, being aware of what other people are going through, and being able to empathize with them because of the circumstances we've navigated.
Yeah. So often too, like the, people that follow the show, they're like, man, it's heavy. Like, how do you do it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, these conversations are a lot, man. You just sit there and take it. And I tell them, it didn't occur to me until recently. I just said, it's because I've been prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all of this is preparation, right? Like when we go through really, really difficult times, even catastrophic events like you went through, we're being prepared for something.
Yep.
And certainly in the moment, we don't understand why. You never do.
Nope.
But the more you go through it, the next time you experience catastrophe, you go, okay, Lord, I see you. Yes. I'm being prepared for something. And I'm willing to take this burden on with you.
Right.
And one day I'll know. And, some of those things, like the podcast for me is a manifestation of that. I couldn't have had these type of conversations if I hadn't been prepared really well.
Yep.
Through the things that I've been through in my life.
Yeah. To hold space for them, to be able to not shut down when you hear something that's so wild and crazy, to not project onto them in the midst of it, because you've been able to cultivate that understanding, that awareness. Yeah. You've been equipped, and it's pretty neat, man.
Yeah.
It's pretty damn neat.
So let's talk about what you're working on now. There's some things I think that have, you mentioned a book and some other things. Talk to me about, like, where does James Dykes' life and your family's life go from here?
I see it blossoming right now. I have been a writer for most of my life. I've always enjoyed being able to understand words and putting them together to create a story. And so I have actually I have 4 drafts of different books that just kind of all came together at once. That's kind of the way it happens for me. It's like nothing and then everything all at once. So I'm writing kind of a memoir type book for my wife, telling her story and kind of articulating um, the intricacies of who she was. And it's largely based on a writing that I did the day before her funeral, and kind of poured my heart out, just describing who she was to me, who she was to my girls, who she was to people around her, and also the seeds from her life and the way in which she expressed herself and the love that she carried, and how she spread those to so many souls. Um, and so that's one of the ones I'm working on. I also felt this draw to really articulate and write out my testimony and my story. So it's kind of going to be in a bit of an autobiography type format. Um, and I also have one that's kind of a letter to the church. It's kind of calling out the fact that Jesus meant the church to be a hospital for the broken and not a museum of the saints. And I think that that's something that has been lost over time, not in all communities, but um, when you have this potential inclusivity aspect that can infiltrate the organization of faith, it can create the dynamic to where now you have lost sight of your own sins and the fact that you needed a savior, and now can create a potential judgmental kind of perspective. And so it's kind of in a format of a letter. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm wrestling with a few different titles, wondering how edgy I want to be with it. But that's another one. And then a very heady book is focused on organizational development and leadership, and kind of looking at an organization as a tree instead of the normal silos and org charts and whatnot, but actually thinking about the fabric that's in a tree. The fruit is kind of the goods and services that you're trying to produce, and how might you structure yourself from a leadership standpoint to be able to see all the intricate parts and how each one is equally valuable. While it could be related to cleaning the toilets, or it could be related to giving speeches, but they're all equally important for it to work in a synergistic aspect. And I think that that's something that's been just on my heart over time. I'll still remember, spacing off in a strategic meeting, looking out at a tree and doing my first doodle. And then it's expanded to a white paper, and then now is translating into a potential book that I'd like to release with case studies and, opportunities for leaders to reflect and ask themselves some hard questions on how they can better lead and cultivate the right environment for their employees and the people that work for them.
Which one do you feel the most called to do first?
The letter to the church. It's definitely the one that I feel the most fire in my belly, because it's personal. It's something that has, was a struggle for my wife. So there's intricacies and layers associated with that, and what her experiences were within different communities of faith, and the receiving that was there, and the lack of tangibility in the walk with somebody going through deep suffering, which is, so I don't know. I think that's that one. And then obviously the memoir for my wife. I'm pretty darn excited about that.
How do you make sure you do the letter from the right place?
I think it's all about tone and a recognition of the fact that the, Jesus' bride, which is what the church is, has been, has gone through different experiences that have led them to believe a certain way. And what they're waiting for is some other model, some other way of expression, some way of getting comfortable with their own stuff, because it goes back to what we were just talking about. When you go through these experiences and these trials and we allow ourselves the space to experience them fully, then we have a more open heart. We have a more open expression towards other people to then receive them and to see them as themselves, because that's the greatest commandment that Jesus gave to us, which is to love our God with all our heart, soul, and mind, and to love our neighbor as ourself. And he gave us a description of what a neighbor is. The Samaritan that took care of the individual that was beaten and left for dead, while the Pharisees and Sadducees, the religious people, walked on by, and while the people that were from his native land, walked on by. And it was a Samaritan who, in the context of that, was looked at as a dog, lesser than a dog. And they were the ones that came and showed neighborly love. And so a neighbor is everyone, and we're supposed to see each other through Christ's eyes of love and to be able to extend that hand.
Yeah. I'd like to read the first 2 paragraphs of your testimony, because I'm assuming nobody's ever read this back to you. You've probably read it yourself. You've read it out loud, but I'd like to read this, and obviously, part of this is personal to me because you included me in your testimony, which I think was amazing. So you said, "My name is James Dykes, renewing my expression of love, both in receiving it and freely giving it. My purpose in life is to love and to be loved, bringing glory to the Father as I follow his Son, Jesus Christ. I became a widower on March 1st, 2023, when my wife, Krista Lee, passed away from a spontaneous and have spent the last year and a half striving to process through my grief, pain, and suffering. I've experienced what seems like everything under the sun as I've navigated the path and tried to cultivate an environment for my daughters, Cameron Lee and Elsie Joy, to continue to choose love and life while making space for the emotional processing required for them to grow and thrive after the tragedy that occurred in our lives. The rock that has held me and carried me through this journey has been my faith in Jesus Christ. It's the understanding that he's the man of sorrows whose spirit dwells with me in the secret place to be wrestling partner as I've wrestled with him and lamented with him over what has occurred. The Holy Spirit has prompted me to reach out with resistance from flesh, but with the watering of those seeds by Christ. I've been able to navigate my way to a computer to write you an email. Through this life, and with something that only God could have ordained, my story is starting to be shared. My story is one of sorrow and redemption. And I had the opportunity recently to be on a podcast where I shared the story of my wife's passing and where it's taken me and taught me. The Roller Coaster podcast with Tyler Hall released a reel on the session together back in April and now has over 12 million views on TikTok and 12 million views on Instagram, as well as millions of other times on various other podcasts and listening platforms. I can't even begin to understand what is happening other than the world is hungry for authenticity. And I've surrendered over and over to the Lord my whole life as I've navigated through the suffering, trauma, and sorrow that has come my way. I've definitely connected with Job and what occurred with him, and understand that God did not ordain the events that have occurred, but rather the thief that comes to steal, kill, and destroy us. I know that Jesus is the only way to navigate through the aspects of life. As I continue to fail forward, surrendering when I come to recognize my faults and how the garden of my life isn't producing the fruit of the Spirit that he desires in me.
Mm. The inner analyst in me wants to pick apart my words, but that's really interesting and intriguing to hear somebody else read that, because it is exactly what all of me wants, is to be so open to what is to come that I won't artificially quench my expression of joy and the peace that he's given me, but also with the awareness of the aspects of the life we live in to then extend the hand to somebody else. It doesn't take a lot to lift somebody else up. It takes a small sacrifice of time to be able to make space for somebody else. Person on the street, it doesn't take much to go to the gas station and grab some water and a bite to eat, and that's something that me and my daughters do all the time. I love taking trips with them because they're constantly having eyes out, and it's almost become something I'm like, oh, girls, we got to get to an appointment. Like, we have to respect the things that are in front of us, but we are always looking to extend the hand to anybody around us, because the reality is we're blessed to be in the situation that we're in, even despite the suffering and all the trauma that we've gone through, that we can love somebody else through their experiences. And that's what life boils down to. You said it earlier, if you lost your job tomorrow, or I lost my job tomorrow, what would that mean to who I am? Well, I was knit together from the fabric of love, and that's something that can never be taken away from me. And so I always will try to make space for another, whether that's providing for a need, something practical, sharing a prayer with them, whatever it looks like, to be able to try to extend and lift up and support another.
Yeah. I wish I would have thought about this earlier in the interview, but I'd be remiss if I didn't share it. So when we were talking about some of the negativity that, we've seen online with really what's supposed to be such a positive story at the end of the day, it's supposed to help people. I interviewed a guy recently. The podcast interview won't go out for at least another month or two. His name's Chris Williams, sorry. And he was out with his wife and 3 kids. Their ages at the time were, I want to say 12, 8, and 6, something like that. And they were struck in the car by a drunk driver at 70 miles an hour. And he recalls the experience of watching his wife, who was in the front seat, take her last breath, and then turn around and realize that 2 out of his 3 kids were dead. They're on the spot. And man, his expression of forgiveness and the way that he was immediately in that moment able to go to a place of, is the other driver okay?
Right.
I hope that they're okay. And then shortly after, to find out that they were intoxicated. He was 18 years old. He was by himself. He lived. And a year later, got to face this man when he was incarcerated and tell him, I forgive you. I forgive you for what you've done.
Right.
And, I think it's a great reminder that you're going to have people online and in other places ridicule this story for one reason or another. And that's okay.
Yep.
And I forgive you for that. And I hope whatever you're going through, you can bear that and get through it. Right.
Yep.
So I'd like to wrap this with, there's a lot of people, we talked earlier, that are out there suffering, but they're doing it alone. And they're, maybe they don't have a community. They don't feel like they can turn to anybody. And so they're going to suffer in silence. They're going to do it alone, maybe until it's too late. And so I want you to, obviously, community and other people and having brothers around you that can lift you up and that you can pour into them has been a major part of your story in getting back to a really good place. So I'd like you to address in your camera those who are out there that are suffering alone and why it might be important for them to reach out, to build community, to get help, and not do this by themselves.
Yeah. Well, I would say that I can't extend this message without saying, first, I'm sorry for what you've gone through, and that you haven't had that community to be able to to surround you and to make you feel safe in your expression. I think that what I would also say is that it's easy for us to close off. It's easy for us to shut down and to, as I said earlier, create this imposter aspect of, I'm not important enough to be able to communicate. But that is the lie. You are here for a reason. You are enough, and it sucks what you've gone through. But all you have to do is take that one simple step to open up and make that phone call, to choose to have courage and to stand within the authenticity of what you've gone through and share it. Because there is power in our expressions. There is power in you to be able to stand up and to share your message with another person. It's not easy. I'm not going to act like it's just this, easy thing, because that's what's put you in the place that you are now. But you have the ability to open up to basically anyone. I mean, when I didn't have the community around me, I would talk to random strangers that opened up and had the space within them to be able to ask questions and get curious. And so take those moments. Take those moments to be able to allow yourself to open up and receive from another person. Because the problem is that when we're closed off, we not only aren't able to share with them what's gone on in our life, but we also can't receive the insight and wisdom and support and love and encouragement from people around us. So pray for courage. If you're not the praying type, sit down, find that place within yourself and share it. You have to have the opportunity to open up and share. And it really does take a level of boldness and courage that you have within yourself. You can do this. I believe in you. If you need somebody to make space for you, reach out. I'd love to make space for you and to pray with you.
Amen.
Amen.
James, thank you for joining the Roller Coaster Podcast again.
Thank you, brother.
That's
Good stuff.